Tom Cruise storms off Jimmy Kimmel Live after the host crosses multiple lines during what should have been a routine promotional interview. What began as lighthearted banter quickly descended into one of the most uncomfortable confrontations ever witnessed on late-night television. The studio lights seemed brighter than usual that evening at the Capitan Entertainment Centre. The audience, primed with excitement, erupted into thunderous applause as Jimmy Kimmel announced his next guest. Ladies and gentlemen, he's here to talk about his new film, Precipice. Please welcome the one and only Tom Cruise. Cruise bounded onto the stage with his trademark enthusiasm, high-fiving audience members along the aisle before embracing Kimmel with what appeared to be genuine warmth. His megawatt smile illuminated the studio as he settled into the guest chair, adjusting his perfectly tailored navy suit. Tom Cruise, everybody! Kimmel gestured toward the audience as they continued their enthusiastic reception. Great to have you back. It's great to be back, Jimmy, Cruise responded, his energy palpable. Always a pleasure. The interview began innocuously enough. Kimmel asked about Precipice, the high-octane thriller that had industry insiders already whispering about award nominations. Cruise launched into an animated description of the film's most challenging stunt sequence, a harrowing helicopter chase through a narrow canyon that he, predictably, had insisted on performing himself. So you're still doing that, Kimmel interjected, his tone carrying a subtle edge that wasn't there moments before. The whole "I do my own stunts" thing. At your age, isn't that getting a little, I don't know, desperate? A flicker of confusion crossed Cruise's face, quickly masked by a professional smile. The audience's reaction was mixed, nervous laughter interspersed with uncomfortable murmurs. Well, Jimmy, it's about authenticity, Cruise responded smoothly. The audience can tell when it's really you in the moment, facing genuine danger. That's what makes cinema special. Kimmel nodded, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Sure. Authenticity. Speaking of authenticity, I've been meaning to ask you something. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate and tangible. The production assistant standing just off camera exchanged a worried glance with the floor manager. This wasn't on the pre-interview list of approved topics. Your relationship with certain controversial figures has raised a lot of eyebrows over the years, Kimmel continued, leaning forward in his chair. I'm curious, how do you reconcile that with the wholesome image you try to project? The audience fell completely silent. Cruise's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Jimmy, he replied, his voice level but with an unmistakable undercurrent of steel. Come on, Tom, Kimmel pressed, ignoring the frantic gestures from his producer. Everyone knows about your associations. Don't you think your fans deserve some honesty? Here, after all, authenticity is what makes entertainment special, right? Cruise shifted in his seat, maintaining his composure despite the unexpected ambush. I came here to talk about Precipice, Jimmy. If you've seen the film, you'd know it's about a man who stands up for what he believes in, even when the whole world seems against him. Art imitating life? Kimmel quipped, his tone increasingly barbed. Or is it the other way around? The tension between them crackled like electricity. Crew members exchanged alarmed glances. This wasn't the friendly banter viewers had tuned in for. It was rapidly veering into unprecedented territory for a promotional appearance. You know, it's interesting, Cruise said, his voice calm but firm. I've always respected you as an interviewer because you seem to understand the line between entertainment and invasion of privacy. I'm disappointed to see that's changed, Kimmel shrugged dismissively. Times change, people change. Well, most people change. Some stay stuck in the same patterns for decades, surrounded by enablers who never tell them the truth. The audience gasped audibly. Even for Kimmel, known for occasionally pushing boundaries, this level of provocative questioning was extraordinary. The network executives watching from the control room began urgently discussing whether to cut to commercial. Cruz's legendary self-control was being tested, like never before in public. He uncrossed and recrossed his legs, buying himself a moment to compose a response. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion, Jimmy. But there's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately disrespectful. I've been in this industry for over 4 decades, and I've learned that professionalism matters." "Professionalism," Kimmel repeated with a hollow laugh. "That's rich coming from someone with your unique approach to professional relationships." The director frantically signaled for the cameras to cut away, but Kimmel waved him off. "Let me be clear about something," Cruz said, sitting forward, his friendly demeanor evaporating entirely. "I came here as a courtesy, to talk about a film that hundreds of dedicated professionals poured their hearts into creating. I didn't come here to be insulted or to have my personal life dissected for ratings," Kimmel smirked, doubling down. "But Tom, surely someone as powerful as you in Hollywood can handle a few direct questions? Or is control so important that even a hint of criticism sends you into damage control mode?" Cruz's eyes narrowed slightly. For perhaps the first time in his career, the public was witnessing the mask of celebrity slip, revealing the steel beneath the smile. "I've always been straightforward with you, Jimmy," Cruz replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet that commanded attention more effectively than any shout. "I've respected this show and its platform, but it seems you've already decided the narrative you want to push tonight, regardless of the truth." The commercial break couldn't come soon enough for the increasingly distressed production team. The floor manager was frantically signaling, drawing a finger across his throat in the universal sign to cut. But Kimmel appeared determined to pursue this unplanned confrontation wherever it led. "The truth," Kimmel echoed, his expression hardening. "Now that's something I'd love to discuss. Let's talk about what happens to people who speak the truth around you. I've heard some fascinating stories from former colleagues of yours that would make our viewers' hair stand on end." In the control room, absolute panic had set in. This wasn't just off-script, it was potentially legally problematic territory. The network's legal counsel, who monitored high-profile interviews remotely, was already calling the executive producer's cell phone, which buzzed urgently on the console. On stage, the atmosphere had transformed into something dangerous. The audience, usually buoyant with laughter, sat in stunned silence, witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. Several were already surreptitiously recording on their phones, sensing they were watching a career-defining moment unfold in real time. "You know what, Jimmy?" Cruz said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge. "I've always believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm starting to think I've been too generous with you." He uncrossed his legs and shifted forward, occupying the edge of his seat. The body language experts who would analyze this footage tomorrow would note how he was poised between flight and fight, a man calculating his options in real time. "Too generous?" Kimmel's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "That's not what I've heard from people who've worked with you. In fact, generous isn't typically the first word that comes up." Cruz's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You know, it's interesting to me that you'd take this approach tonight. 20 years in this business, and I've never seen you go after a guest like this. Makes me wonder what the real agenda is here." Kimmel's smirk remained fixed, but something flashed behind his eyes. Perhaps the realization that he was tangling with someone who wouldn't easily be rattled into a viral moment of lost composure. "No agenda, Tom. Just honest questions that the public wants answered. Isn't that what good journalism is about?" "Journalism?" Cruz let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Is that what you think you're doing right now? This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is ambush entertainment at someone else's expense, and frankly, it's beneath you." The floor director was frantically signaling for a commercial break, drawing a finger across his throat with increasing desperation. Kimmel ignored him completely. "What's beneath me," Kimmel retorted, his voice hardening, "is playing along with The carefully constructed image that you and your team work so hard to maintain. The public deserves better. The public deserves entertainment, Cruz countered, his famous intensity now fully engaged. They don't tune into your show for hit pieces. They come for laughs and authentic conversation. But I guess authentic conversation only works when both parties are acting in good faith. A thin layer of perspiration had formed on Kimmel's forehead under the hot studio lights. The host tugged at his collar slightly. A tell that media training. Experts would later dissect as a sign that he knew he'd crossed a line, but was too committed to retreat. Speaking of good faith, Kimmel pressed on, let's talk about your relationship with... No, Cruz interrupted, his voice so authoritative that Kimmel actually stopped mid-sentence. We're not doing that. Not here. Not like this. A hush fell over the studio. Even the cameramen seemed to be holding their breath. This was unprecedented territory, a guest directly refusing to engage with the host's line of questioning. I've always been respectful of this show and its platform, Cruz continued, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable warning. I've always been honest with your audience, but what you're doing right now isn't about honesty. It's about ratings and clicks. Kimmel leaned back, affecting casualness, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his discomfort. Funny how criticism always becomes about ratings when it hits a nerve. Maybe there's something to that? Or maybe, Cruz countered, there's something to the fact that you've departed from every professional courtesy typically extended to guests on this show. I have to wonder why. The subtext was clear to everyone in the room. Cruz wasn't just defending himself. He was questioning Kimmel's motives in a way that suggested darker implications. The executive producer finally overrode Kimmel's authority, signaling for an immediate cut to commercial. The on-air light blinked off, but the cameras continued, rolling, standard procedure to capture any usable moments for later editing. As soon as they were off-air, Kimmel's fake smile dropped entirely. Look, Tom, we're just having a conversation here. The audience appreciates real talk. It's what makes good television. No, Cruz replied, removing his microphone with deliberate movements. What you're doing is attempting to provoke a reaction. For views. That's not conversation. That's exploitation. The commercial break wouldn't last long, less than 2 minutes to diffuse a situation rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. The show's producer rushed onto the stage, positioning herself between the two men like a boxing referee. Jimmy, we need to redirect when we come back. Tom, I apologize for the... Don't apologize for him, Cruz said quietly. He's a grown man making deliberate choices. Kimmel's expression darkened. And you're not? Let's talk about some of your choices over the years, Tom. The people you've aligned yourself with. The ones who've been hurt in your wake. The producer's eyes widened in alarm. Jimmy, that's enough. Is it enough? Kimmel challenged, ignoring his producer completely, his eyes locked on Cruz. Because I think we've barely scratched the surface. Cruz stood then, straightening his jacket with the same precision he brought to every movement on screen. I came here as a professional courtesy. I've always respected your show and what you do. But this? He gestured between them. This isn't about entertainment or truth. It's about something else entirely. 30 seconds, called the floor manager, panic evident in his voice. Cruz turned to the producer. I'm sorry, but I won't be continuing this interview. Tom, please, she implored, acutely aware of the disaster unfolding. A star of Cruz's magnitude walking off mid-show would be catastrophic. We'll redirect, I promise. Jimmy will stick to the approved topics. Will he? Cruz asked, with a pointed look at Kimmel, who had risen from his chair, his expression thunderous. You walk off now, and you're confirming every suspicion people have about you, Kimmel said, voice low enough that only those on stage could hear. And you continuing this way confirms what I now understand about you, Cruz replied, his trademark intensity focused entirely on the host. 10 seconds! The tension between the two men was palpable, like opposing weather fronts colliding. The audience, sensing the genuine conflict happening during the break, had fallen completely silent, straining to catch every word exchanged. "We're back in 3, 2. The floor director pointed silently on 1, and the on-air light blazed red once more. Kimmel plastered on his television smile with practiced ease, turning to the camera as though the preceding confrontation had never happened. "Welcome back to the show, everyone. We're here with Tom Cruise, discussing his new film Precipice, which opens this Friday nationwide." The camera panned to include Cruise, who had reluctantly retaken his seat. His expression was a masterclass in controlled emotion, civility maintained by sheer force of will. "Tom, before the break, we were discussing some of the more controversial aspects of your career," Kimmel continued, blatantly ignoring his producer's frantic gestures to change course. "I think our audience deserves to hear your perspective on—" "What they deserve," Cruise interrupted, his voice level but firm, "is better than this, Jimmy. They tune in to be entertained, not to watch someone being ambushed." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. This wasn't the scripted banter they were accustomed to. This was genuine conflict unfolding before their eyes. "Ambushed?" Kimmel affected surprise. "Asking straightforward questions is considered an ambush now. That's an interesting perspective from someone who controls every aspect of his public image with military precision." Cruise took a measured breath, his hands resting lightly on the chair arms. "You know exactly what you're doing. These aren't the questions we agreed to discuss." "I wasn't aware Tom Cruise needed pre-approval for questions these days," Kimmel said, addressing the audience directly now. "Is that standard procedure for all your interviews, Tom?" The deliberate attempt to paint Cruise as controlling backfired, visibly as several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Whatever entertainment value had existed in the tension was rapidly transforming into something uglier. "What's standard procedure?" Cruise responded, his famous smile nowhere in evidence. "Is professional courtesy. Something I extended to you by appearing on this show." "Professional courtesy?" Kimmel's eyebrows shot up. "Let's talk about professional courtesy, shall we? I've heard stories from directors who've worked with you that would make our viewers' hair curl." The network censor's finger hovered anxiously over the delay button in the control room, prepared to silence anything potentially libelous. "You know what's interesting to me, Jimmy?" Cruise leaned forward, his intensity suddenly reminiscent of his most compelling on-screen moments. "You keep alluding to stories and rumors, but you won't actually state anything concrete. That's not journalism or even good entertainment. It's just innuendo designed to damage without having the courage to make an actual claim." A few audience members actually applauded, quickly silenced by frantic gestures from the floor manager. Kimmel's face flushed slightly. "If you want concrete, Tom, how about we discuss your relationship with—" "My relationships aren't up for discussion," Cruise cut in, his tone brooking no argument. "My work is. My films are. But you seem determined to avoid talking about either of those tonight." "Because everyone already knows about your films," Kimmel retorted. "The stunts, the running, the intensity. It's the same package every time. What people are really curious about is the man behind the carefully constructed facade. And you think ambushing someone on live television is the way to explore that?" Cruise shook his head, genuine disappointment evident in his expression. "That says more about your approach to journalism than it does about me." Something in Kimmel snapped. Then, perhaps it was being lectured on journalistic integrity by an actor, or perhaps he'd simply committed so fully to this confrontational path that retreat was impossible. "You want to talk about my approach to journalism?" Kimmel's voice rose slightly. "How about we discuss your approach to controlling the people around you? The way former associates suddenly disappear from your life when they ask too many questions?" In the control room, the executive producer was now shouting into his headset, demanding Kimmel be cut off. But the floor director seemed paralyzed by the unprecedented situation unfolding. Cruz's expression hardened, but his voice remained measured. "I've spent decades in this industry building relationships based on mutual respect and professionalism. I won't sit here and let you imply otherwise based on gossip and tabloid speculation." "Not tabloid speculation," Kimmel pressed, ignoring the increasingly desperate signals from his team. "First-hand accounts from people who've worked closely with you, people who've been silenced." "This interview is over." Cruz stood abruptly, removing his microphone for the second time. "I came here in good faith to discuss a film that hundreds of talented people poured their hearts into creating. Instead, you've chosen to pursue a different agenda entirely." Kimmel rose as well, his professional mask crumbling. "Running away from tough questions, Tom. Is that what you're teaching your daughter to do when confronted with uncomfortable truths?" The collective gasp from the audience was audible. The line had been crossed. Family was universally understood to be off-limits, even in the most contentious interviews. Cruz froze, his back to the camera. For a moment, the studio was suspended in perfect, terrible silence. When he turned, the look in his eyes caused Kimmel to take an involuntary step backward. "You can attack me," Cruz said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You can question my career, my choices, my beliefs, but you do not bring my family into this. Not my daughter, not ever." The raw emotion in his voice stripped away any pretense that this was still entertainment. This was a father, not a movie star, standing before them now. "Tom, Kimmel began, perhaps finally recognizing he'd ventured into indefensible territory. "We're done here." Cruz turned to the audience, his composure partially restored through visible effort. "I apologize to all of you. You deserved better entertainment than this tonight." He walked off the set with the same deliberate grace he brought to his film performances, leaving Kimmel standing alone in the harsh studio lighting. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the exit door closing with quiet finality. Kimmel stood frozen, the cameras still rolling, capturing every excruciating second of the aftermath. His producer was now physically on set, frantically signaling for a commercial break that should have happened minutes ago. "Cut to commercial!" The producer's voice finally broke through Kimmel's stunned silence. The on-air light blinked off, and the studio erupted into chaos. Audience members were already on their phones, furiously typing and recording reactions. The production assistants huddled in urgent consultation while the executive producer stormed onto the set, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, getting right in Kimmel's face. "We had agreed topics. We had boundaries. You just torched our relationship with not just Cruz, but potentially every major star in Hollywood." Kimmel's usual smirk was nowhere to be seen. For perhaps the first time in his career, he looked genuinely rattled. It was just pushing for authentic television. The audience wants real moments. "That wasn't a real moment," the producer cut him off. "That was character assassination on live television. The network legal team is already calling. This isn't going away with an apology." In the green room, Cruz's publicist was already on 3 phones simultaneously. One with Cruz's legal team, one with the network executives, and one with Cruz himself, who was already in his car heading away from the studio. "Tom, I am so sorry," the publicist said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "This was completely unprofessional and beyond the pale. We're already drafting statements and—" "No statements," Cruz's voice came through clearly. "No press releases. No social media posts from the team. But Tom, we need to control the narrative before—" "The situation speaks for itself," Cruz interrupted, his voice calm now that he was removed from the immediate confrontation. "Anyone who watched will know exactly what happened. Adding more words just prolongs the story." Back in the studio, emergency meetings were already forming in the corners. The show's head writer appeared physically ill, knowing that his career was potentially collateral damage in Kimmel's reckless gambit. The audience was being asked to remain seated. though many were ignoring the request and streaming toward the exits, their expressions ranging from shocked to disgusted. Kimmel retreated to his dressing room, slamming the door behind him. The bravado that had fueled his provocative questioning was rapidly evaporating as the full consequences of his actions began to crystallize. His phone was already lighting up with notifications. The incident was spreading across social media with the uncontrollable velocity of a California wildfire. Outside the dressing room, the executive producer turned to the show's director. "We've got 7 minutes of dead air to fill. Get the band to play an extended set and prep Guillermo for an emergency segment. We'll figure out what to tell the audience after I talk to the network." Across town, in his private car, Cruise sat in silence, looking out at the passing lights of Los Angeles. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders had finally begun to ease. His personal assistant sat across from him, waiting for instructions. "Sir? What would you like us to do?" Cruise considered for a moment before responding. "Nothing tonight. Let's see how they handle it." As the evening progressed, the incident spread across every platform. Clips were already being edited and shared, hashtags forming and trending within minutes. Kimmel Cruise crash and Chai's respect Tom Cruise rocketed to the top of trending topics worldwide. The network, recognizing the severity of the situation, made the unprecedented decision to delay the West Coast feed, replacing the Cruise segment with a previously recorded interview before the show aired in later time zones. But it was too late. Live audience recordings were already circulating, shared millions of times across every platform. By midnight, network executives had convened an emergency meeting. The preliminary numbers were catastrophic. Early metrics showed a massive viewer backlash, with sentiment running overwhelmingly against Kimmel and the show. More concerning were the calls coming in from other A-list publicists, all asking variations of the same question. "Is this how you treat your guests now?" Morning brought no relief. The major entertainment news shows led with the confrontation, analysts dissecting every moment, every word exchanged. Public opinion had solidified overnight. Kimmel had crossed a line, not just with his questions about Cruise's personal life, but most unforgivably, by bringing his daughter into the fray. The network released a carefully worded statement by noon. "We deeply regret the events that transpired during last night's broadcast of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The line of questioning directed at our guest was not approved by network standards and practices and does not reflect our values as an organization. We extend our sincere apologies to Mr. Cruise and are taking appropriate measures to ensure such an incident never occurs again." The deliberate ambiguity of "appropriate measures" set off a new round of speculation. Entertainment insiders began reporting that emergency meetings were being held to discuss Kimmel's future with the network. Cruise, true to his word, maintained his silence. His only public appearance was a previously scheduled fan event for Precipice the following evening, where he arrived to thunderous supportive applause. When a reporter shouted a question about the Kimmel incident, Cruise simply smiled and redirected attention to the fans who had come to celebrate the film. 3 days after the incident, the other shoe dropped. The network announced that Jimmy Kimmel Live would be going on an unplanned hiatus, effective immediately. Guest hosts would fill in temporarily while production challenges were addressed. The industry understood the coded language. Kimmel was being benched, possibly permanently. A week later, as the controversy showed no signs of abating, Kimmel finally released his own statement. "I want to sincerely apologize to Tom Cruise for my behavior during our recent interview. My questions were inappropriate and crossed lines that should never be crossed. I especially regret any reference to Mr. Cruise's family, which was inexcusable under any circumstances. I've reached out privately to apologize directly and will be taking time to reflect on how I can better serve our viewers and guests in the future." The apology came too late to save the show's ratings, which had plummeted to historic lows. Advertiser exodus had begun, with major brands quietly pulling their spots from future bookings. The final blow came a month after the incident. The network, citing a desire to move in a new creative direction, announced that Jimmy Kimmel Live would conclude its run at the end of the season. Kimmel would be leaving to pursue other opportunities, effectively ending his 25-year late-night career. The entertainment industry took note. The incident had established a new boundary in the ever-evolving relationship between celebrities and media. Probing questions were one thing, personal attacks and family references were career-ending offenses. Meanwhile, Precipice opened to the biggest box office of Cruise's career, boosted at least in part by the wave of public sympathy following the confrontation. Critics noted that the film's themes of standing up against institutional corruption seemed particularly resonant given recent events. 6 months later, at the industry's annual award ceremony, Cruise was presenting the Lifetime Achievement Award, when he paused reflectively before introducing the recipient. "In our business, we understand that genuine moments matter. Authenticity matters. But so does respect. For the craft, for the work, and for each other as human beings beyond our public. Personas." The audience rose in a standing ovation, understanding exactly what remained unsaid. In the years that followed, the Kimmel-Cruise confrontation would be studied in media classes as a pivotal moment when the power dynamic between interviewer and subject fundamentally shifted, a reminder that even in a business built on exposure, some boundaries remain inviolable.